In this world, people can receive epic skills by eating the fruit of the skill tree. So, if you're lucky, you might become a firebender or maybe even a sword saint. But when it comes to Light, all he became was a nutting master. On the day they were meant to get their skills, Light and his childhood friend Lena were on their way to the church to begin the ceremony, and they were excitedly talking about what skills they hoped to receive. Light had always wanted to become an adventurer, so he would be happy with any combat-type skill, but Lena doesn't really care what skill she gets as long as she can spend time with Light. Still, she's a bit nervous since no one really knows what kind of skill they'll get until they eat the fruit. But Light is sure they'll both get amazing skills. However, we already know how that turned out for him. When he and Lena went into the church that day, the Holy Sister told them all about how the skill fruits work. You're granted a skill once you eat the fruit, and it will guarantee you a job in any related field of your choice, or without any crippling student loan debt. They are allowed to pick any one of these fruits to get their skill, but there is a rule they can't break. No matter what, you're only allowed to eat one skill fruit over the course of your entire life, because if you try to eat a second, it'll poison you. A lot of people have ended up dying because they didn't like their skill and tried to eat a second fruit. So, the Holy Sister wants to make it very clear that eating more than one has a 100% fatality rate. Light is shocked to hear that the fruits are so dangerous, but the Holy Sister assures him that as long as he doesn't eat a second fruit, he'll be perfectly fine. With the warnings out of the way, the Holy Sister tells them to begin selecting their fruit. Lena steps up first. She takes a bite out of one of the fruits and immediately feels something happening to her body. There's a blinding light, and Lena's body suddenly becomes very hot. The Holy Sister realizes that this must be the legendary Sword Saint skill. It's incredibly rare, so she never thought she would get to see someone acquire it in person. But now that Lena is officially a Sword Saint, she is destined to become one of the greatest adventurers in the country. Light is really happy for Lena, so he congratulates her on her amazing skill. But it's his turn next. He steps up to the altar and picks a skill fruit for himself. He knows he probably won't get something as good as the Sword Saint skill, but is still hoping to acquire a decent combat skill so he can fight by Lena's side. However, as he takes a bite and the skill flows into his body, he's disappointed to hear that he's just a nutting master. The sister tries to be as supportive as she can. But yeah, the only fighting Light's going to be doing is against the pests out in the field. Light is devastated that his dreams of being an adventurer have been ruined, so he asks if he can try again. But the sister was very clear about the 100% fatality rate, so she's not letting him eat another fruit. Lena tries to cheer Light up and tells him she'll stay in the village and grow fruits with him since she doesn't care what she does as long as they're together. But the Holy Sister won't stand for all this love and compassion BS. Lena's Sword Saint skill is a once-in-a-decade marvel, so she's not going to let her waste that talent by becoming a farmer. She demands that Lena become an adventurer for the sake of the country. And in fact, she'll be taking her to the royal capital immediately so she can begin her training there. Lena doesn't have the guts to refuse the Holy Sister's demands, so she gets dragged off, but she promises to come back for Light someday. 3 months have passed since that fateful day, and Light is trying to make the best of his situation by leaning into his role as a farmer. He uses his powers to make the nuts grow nice and big, and when they are ripe, he sells them for profit in town. So, his life isn't so bad, as long as he pushes those intrusive thoughts to the back of his head. Anyway, he heads into town to sell his nuts, but since his nuts are so small, he gets paid very little for them. As he's walking back to his house, he notices a poster with some news about Lena. She's apparently been promoted to S rank in the 3 months since she left the village and is doing incredibly well for herself. Of course, he is happy for her, but hearing about how well she's doing just makes him feel like an absolute failure. Even though he knows that he doesn't have the skill to become an adventurer, Light has been training every day in hopes that he might naturally unlock a sword skill or something. He repeatedly strikes at a tree stump and believes that if he can split it in half with a sword, then he will be strong enough to become an adventurer by his own merit. However, hard work doesn't always pay off, so the only thing he got from all that training was some bruised wrists. He falls to the floor in defeat and begins wondering if Lena still remembers him. She said she would come back for him, But with all the fame and fortune she has acquired, he wouldn't be shocked if she had forgotten his name and his face altogether. Just then, a little girl named Aya walks up to Light and says she brought him a cup of water. She's pretty much an orphan, and the village chief didn't want to deal with her, so he kind of just left her on Light's doorstep one day. Light saw that she had nowhere to go, so he decided to take her in, and the two have been living together ever since. Aya tells him she's done with dinner, so if he wants to, he can come inside to eat. Light happily obliges. He takes his first bite of the food, and while he eats, Aya asks him how today's harvest went. Overall, Light says today's profits were pretty good, especially since he started focusing on growing skill fruits recently. And by the way, he separated all the skill fruits into those boxes clearly marked with skull emojis, so under no circumstances should Aya eat any of those. Aya hadn't realized that the skill fruits were dangerous to eat, so Light's warning is really helpful, or at least it might have been an hour ago, because she used a bunch of those fruits to make the stew they are eating right now. Light gets up in a panic and asks if she is sure she put skill fruits in the stew. But she definitely did. And from what the Holy Sister said, eating a second skill fruit is a guaranteed death sentence. All of a sudden, Light's body begins to feel hot. He feels a pain in his chest, so he believes this is how he will die. He falls to the floor, and in his final breath, he apologizes to Aya because this is his fault for expecting her to understand the labels when she doesn't know how to read yet. However, as he lies there and awaits death, Light realizes death is taking an awfully long time. So, he sits up, and to his surprise, he's perfectly fine. Aya sees the confused expression on Light's face, so she asks him if he's fine. That's exactly why he's confused. He ate a second skill fruit, which should have been fatal. So why and how is he still alive? Just then, he gets a piercing headache and feels the power of a new skill rushing into his body. Just then, Aya starts to feel a sharp pain in her body as well. And since she ate the stew, that must mean she's about to acquire a skill as well. All of a sudden, Aya is able to see words floating in front of Light and reads out the info of his Nut Master skill. In addition to the ability to grow nuts, Light's skill also makes him immune to all nut poisons. Light is shocked and asks Aya how she knows this. She tells him she can see words floating in the air, and Light realizes she must have acquired some sort of appraisal skill. Aya keeps reading Light's information and sees that he has a second skill now. So, she tells him that he possesses an ability called Sword God. The Sword God skill greatly increases Light's attack power when he's holding a sword, as well as greatly increasing his magic resistance. If what Aya said is true, then this might mean that his dream can finally come true. So, Light wants to test it out for himself. He runs outside with his sword and goes back into the forest to see if he really has a new sword skill. He raises his sword, and with a single swing, he slashes the tree stump in half, as well as the bigger tree behind it. So, it's safe to say that as of this moment, Light is OP. The next day, he heads out into town so he can go to the guild and finally become an adventurer. He's really excited since he has always dreamed of coming here, and the first thing he spots is the notice board full of bounty quests. If they successfully complete a quest, then they'll be able to buy new equipment and tasty food. But making money isn't the only reason Light came here today. He wants to figure out how much his Sword God skill will actually help him in battle, and if it goes well for him, then he might be able to become an official adventurer. He tells Aya to sit on a bench and wait for him while he gets a quest at the front desk. And while he's gone, Aya takes the opportunity to use her appraisal skill on all the people in the guild. She's amazed by all the different types of skills that exist, but she is also shocked by how useless some of them are, like this guy who has a self-damaging skill. Just then, she hears a commotion over by the front desk, so she looks over and finds Light in the middle of an argument with one of the adventurers in the guild. The man recognizes Light as the guy who's always selling his nuts in the market, so he mocks him and says a loser like him doesn't belong in the guild. But Light completely ignores him and just tells Aya that they can leave now. The guy is offended that Light would dare to ignore him, so his completely normal reaction is to attack Light with his sword. Light's Sword God skill also improves his reflexes, so he's easily able to block the attack, but the guy had no idea Light could do that, so he fully intended to catch a murder charge today. The guy's friends see that Light is capable of defending himself, so they convince Gene to just walk away because this isn't a fight he can win. Gene tries to play off his outburst and claims he never really intended to hurt Light, so he and his friends leave the guild to go on their first mission. Shortly after, Light and Aya leave as well since Light has gotten the quest for them. They head out into the rocky plains, and Light is really excited since he might finally get to see a monster in person. But this place is dangerous, so he tells Aya to stay close to him. They soon spot their target, and it's that slime monster over in the distance. So, Light prepares himself to fight it. He cautiously approaches in an attempt to sneak up on it, but the slime notices him anyway. So, Light goes for a full frontal assault instead. He's a lot stronger than he used to be, so when he charges at the slime, he slices it in half and accidentally splits the ground in the process. He's happy that his skill really is useful in battle, but is going to have to work on his power management so he doesn't cause any more collateral damage. Aya congratulates Light on his first successful quest, but to complete the quest, they need to cut the slime up and bring the parts back to the guild so they can exchange it for money. Aya says she feels kind of bad about cutting the slime's body up, but Light reminds her that they'll earn enough money for pizza if they sell the slime parts. So, Aya throws her morals out the window and begins dissecting the slime. Just then, they hear someone yelling on the other side of the plains. So, they rush over and find Gene and his party being attacked by a huge ogre. They intentionally picked an easy quest so they could just kill a slime and go home, but they never expected to run into an ogre. The ogre swings at them, and they all jump out of the way, but even if they manage to dodge that first attack, they stand no chance of winning against that thing. Light calls over to them to ask if they are all right, and as soon as Gene spots him, he comes up with a plan to escape. He and his friends start running straight at Light, and Light is a bit confused by what they are doing. Then they run past him, and he realizes they are trying to use him as bait so they can flee the ogre. Now, the ogre intends to attack Light, so he has no choice but to fight it. In fact, this works out well for him since he needs to test the limits of his new skill. The ogre swings its mace at him, so Light jumps to the side to evade it, but is playing a risky game. So Aya warns him that his sword god skill doesn't increase his defense, meaning if he gets hit even once, he's going to die. Even with the threat of dying, Light still refuses to back down from this fight since he's going to become the world's greatest adventurer. And if he plans to accomplish that goal, he needs to overcome this challenge. He has finally gotten used to his body's new strength, so Light jumps into the air, and as the ogre tries to strike him, he slashes its mace in half. No matter what it takes, he will make sure he catches up to Lena so the two of them can be together again. So, in one swift motion, he brings his sword down and cuts the ogre cleanly in half, all while Gene and his friends watch from a nearby hill. A little while later, Light returns to the guild to exchange his items for money, but the receptionist finds it hard to believe that he managed to defeat an ogre all by himself. As proof, Light shows her the ogre horn he brought back. And on top of that, Gene's friends say they saw the whole thing, so they can guarantee that Light is telling the truth. The receptionist believes him, so she asks him to wait a minute so she can get his reward. In the meantime, Gene's friends thank Light again for saving them. Just then, a crowd forms at the front of the guild, so Light asks if something happened, and Gene informs him that the S-rank party has just returned. This happens to be the S-rank party that Lena joined, and this is the first time he has seen her in the last 3 months. So, Light goes up to her and tries to say hello, but in response, Lena says, "I've never met this man before in my life." Light is devastated and can't believe Lena actually forgot about him after only 3 months. So, he's just standing there with his mouth wide open. Aya has no idea what's wrong, so she tries to cheer him up and suggests they should go get some pizza together. Light decides to take Aya to get some pizza, but is still acting depressed, so Aya threatens to eat all the pizza if he doesn't snap out of it soon. Light spent a lot of money on this pizza, so even if he's upset about Lena, there's no way he's letting it go to waste. However, he ate so fast that he ends up choking, but luckily, someone hands him a glass of water to wash it down. He looks up to thank the helpful stranger, but to his surprise, the stranger turns out to be Lena. He's about to yell her name, But Lena covers his mouth and tells him to be quiet. Otherwise, Grouse is going to hear them. She sits down at the table, and Aya introduces herself since this is the first time she's actually met Lena. Lena is about to ask how Light got a kit in just 3 months. But before that, Light asks her what she's doing here. To be honest, Lena was wondering the same thing about Light because she never expected to see him at the guild. So, Light proudly explains that he and Aya became adventurous. He then explains what happened with the whole skill fruit incident, allowing him to acquire a second skill, and Lena seems genuinely happy for him since this means he can finally achieve his dream. Light then asks Lena how her time with the S-rank party has been. Any basiga so far, but from Lena's expression it doesn't seem like it's been much fun. She's basically just being forced to fight with a bunch of random people that the Holy Sister selected. The pay is great, but the atmosphere is more toxic than a Call of Duty lobby, so she advises Light to stay away from Sacred if he wants to enjoy his time as an adventurer. Light still doesn't understand what's so bad about Sacred since he has heard so many good things about them. But Lena recalls an incident 2 months ago when their party was up against a giant serpent. Serpents are weak to fire, so Gruz ordered the mage to blast the serpent. However, the mage went overboard and also set fire to a nearby farm. But when Lena tried to point it out so they could stop the fire, Gruz couldn't care less about destroying a random nobody's farm. Their job was to kill the serpent, and they killed the serpent, so there's no need to concern themselves with pointless things like collateral damage as long as the job gets done. She tried explaining the situation to the Holy Sister as well, but she cared about it even less than Gruz did. She doesn't care how much property is destroyed or how many peasants are killed as long as history remembers them as heroes. She doesn't tell Light about the twisted views of her party, but Light can tell that she's unhappy with him, so he invites her to join him and Aya if she wants. However, as much as Lena would love that, there are circumstances that prevent her from quitting Sacred. She tells Light she's fine, but he can clearly see her crying, so he knows something must be wrong. However, Lena doesn't want to drag him into her mess, so she leaves the table. A little while later, Light goes to the front desk to pick up his reward for killing the ogre, and he is given 10,000 gold pieces, which is more money than he has ever even seen. However, he isn't excited at all despite it. He is really worried about Lena, but he can't help her unless he knows what Sacred is forcing her to do, and she won't tell him directly. Since that's the case, AA says he can just ask the party leader, Gruz, personally, since the door to his lounge is wide open. Inside the lounge, Gruz is currently sitting with 2 ladies and telling them stories about his legendary battles. For instance, he tells them about his most recent battle where he and his party were hunting an evil grizzly, and to take care of it, a torso bear with a massive inferno, before Gruz delivered the finishing blow. Just then, the receptionist comes in because she has something to talk to Gruz about regarding his recent mission. The people from the village where he found that evil grizzly have lodged a complaint against him, saying that the fire attack that Sacred used caused their reservoir to dry up completely, so now they have no water. Gruz immediately dismisses the complaint and makes up an excuse, saying that a little collateral damage is inevitable when dealing with such powerful monsters. But secretly, he actually enjoys causing problems for the weaklings because he thinks they are beneath him. Light overhears the whole conversation, and he is enraged by what he hears because he knows Lena would never disregard the problems of regular people like that. He demands that Gruz let Lena leave Sacred because she's clearly suffering. But Gruz doesn't take him seriously and just calls security over to have Light removed from the lounge. AA rushes over to Light's side to ask if he's all right, and Light is fine. But the other adventurers warn him that it's a bad idea to antagonize Gruz because he may be a jerk, but angering him will get you on the Holy Sister's bad side. And if she's got a grudge against you, then it's safe to say that your adventuring career is over. Later, the next day, all the members of Sacred meet up in the lounge, and they are busy basking in their own greatness. But Lena thinks back to what Light told her about quitting Sacred if it was making her so upset. So she finally works up the courage and declares to everyone that she wants to live by her moral code as an adventurer, which is why she is leaving Sacred, effective immediately. She then starts walking towards the exit, but before she could leave, Gruz dashes in front of her and threatens to kill her for daring to defy him. Lena is about to draw her sword to defend herself. But she realizes that even with her sword saint skill,